It was discovered at that time Terry Bollea, also known as Hulk Hogan, was experiencing a serious medical-related issue. Personnel provided medical treatment at that time and transported Mr. Bollea to Morton Plant Hospital, where he died at 11:17 a.m.
The morning of July 24, 2025, started like any other day in Clearwater, Florida. The sun rose over the Gulf Coast, the streets were quiet, and the city went about its business. But before the morning was over, a piece of American sporting history had come to an end. Hulk Hogan, the man whose name alone could fill arenas for decades, was gone. And almost immediately, the questions began. Terry Gene Bollea, known to the entire world as Hulk Hogan, was 71 years old when he was found unresponsive inside his Florida mansion. Emergency services responded to a 911 call reporting cardiac arrest. Paramedics worked urgently to revive him, but their efforts were unsuccessful. At 11:17 in the morning, he was pronounced dead at Morton Plant Hospital in Clearwater. The official cause of death, confirmed by the medical examiner, was an acute myocardial infarction, a sudden and severe heart attack that stopped his heart without warning. For millions of fans around the world, the news landed like a body slam to the chest. Tributes came flooding in from every corner of the wrestling world and beyond. Former rivals, current champions, and legends of the sport all paused to honor the man who, more than anyone else, had carried professional wrestling from regional entertainment into a global phenomenon. Dwayne Johnson, John Cena, and generations of WWE superstars owed part of their platform to the foundation that Hulk Hogan had built. The yellow and red was gone, and the world felt it. But even as tributes poured in, investigators were looking more closely at the circumstances surrounding his death. The Clearwater Police Department conducted witness interviews and gathered medical records in the days that followed. While they acknowledged the medical examiner's conclusion of a heart attack, they also noted what they described as the unique nature of the circumstances. For law enforcement, the death of one of the most recognized athletes in American history was not something to be processed quickly or carelessly. Due diligence mattered, and several details at the scene gave investigators reason to look deeper. Federal authorities were brought in to assist. The FBI's involvement in what appeared, on the surface, to be a death from natural causes was notable. It was not standard procedure, and it raised eyebrows among those following the case closely. Officials clarified that the involvement was precautionary and thorough, given Hogan's public prominence and the details observed at the property. The investigation was not a declaration of foul play, it was a commitment to getting the facts right. So what did investigators actually find? To understand that, you have to understand the man himself, and the extraordinary physical journey his body had been through in the months before his death. In May 2025, just 10 weeks before he died, Hulk Hogan underwent one of the most serious surgeries of his already complicated medical life. He had a 4-level anterior cervical discectomy and fusion, a complex spinal procedure involving the removal of damaged discs in the neck and the fusing of multiple vertebrae. For a young, healthy patient, this surgery carries significant recovery demands. For a 71-year-old man who had already undergone more than 24 operations throughout his wrestling career, surgeries on his back, hips, knees, and shoulders, the risks were considerably higher. Medical specialists who have discussed procedures of this nature explain that multi-level cervical fusions can, in rare cases, affect the phrenic nerve, which runs through the neck and controls the diaphragm. If that nerve is disturbed or damaged during surgery, a patient can face unexpected respiratory complications, sometimes appearing weeks or even months after the original procedure. Hogan's wife, Sky Daly, was adamant in the weeks following the May surgery that her husband was recovering well. She pushed back publicly against rumors that he was in critical condition, stating clearly that his heart was strong and he was making progress. She was right that he appeared to be improving. He was photographed smiling, greeting fans, and returning to light activity at home. But the surgery had introduced new variables into an already fragile equation. Hogan had been living with 2 serious underlying conditions. He had leukemia, a blood cancer that compromises the immune system and affects the body's ability to recover from physical stress. He also had atrial fibrillation, a heart rhythm disorder that causes the heart to beat irregularly and dramatically increases the risk of sudden cardiac events. Either condition alone would make a major surgery more complicated. Together, they created a picture of a man whose body was fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. When investigators reviewed the timeline surrounding his death, the surgery in May became one of the central threads of their inquiry. Could complications from that spinal procedure have contributed to the cardiac arrest in July? Sky Daily, speaking after his death, indicated that she intended to explore that question legally, describing plans to file a medical malpractice lawsuit. Her position was that a possible injury to the phrenic nerve during the surgery may have compromised his breathing in ways that ultimately overwhelmed his heart. No court has yet ruled on that claim, and the full medical picture remains under professional review. But it is a serious, legitimate question, one that physicians and legal professionals are actively examining. Inside the mansion itself, investigators observed details that they documented carefully. The property was large and well-maintained, reflecting Hogan's success and his preference for privacy. His home gym, which friends and family described as a daily refuge where he worked to maintain his strength and fitness, was inspected by forensic teams. Hogan had been committed in his final years to a health-focused lifestyle. His wife spoke often about their shared routines: clean eating, daily meditation, structured workouts. By all accounts, he had found a quieter, more disciplined version of himself in his later years, far removed from the excesses of his peak wrestling days. The security system at the property was also examined. Hogan, like many high-profile public figures, had invested in comprehensive home security. Investigators reviewed the system as part of standard procedure when examining any unexpected death on a private property. Their findings were documented and passed to the relevant agencies, though no specific conclusions regarding the security infrastructure were made public in a way that suggested criminal activity had occurred. The family dynamics surrounding Hogan's death added another layer of complexity to the story. His personal life had never been simple. His first marriage, to Linda Claridge in 1983, produced 2 children, Brooke and Nick, and lasted more than 2 decades before ending in a very public and painful divorce in 2009. The split was accompanied by accusations, legal battles, and a level of media scrutiny that Hogan later admitted left him in one of the darkest periods of his life. He spoke openly in interviews about experiencing depression and suicidal thoughts during that time, a rare and honest admission from a man whose public image was built on invincibility. A second marriage to Jennifer McDaniel in 2010 provided some stability but ended quietly in 2021. His third marriage, to yoga instructor Sky Daily in 2023, seemed to bring genuine peace. Those who knew him in his final years described a calmer, more reflective version of the wrestling giant, a man who had made his health a priority and found meaning outside the spotlight. Yet the family picture was not without tension. His daughter Brooke had been largely absent from his life in his final years. The relationship between father and daughter had been strained for some time, worn down by the public scandals that had followed Hogan through the later portion of his career. She did not attend his third wedding, and their public interactions had been minimal for years. After his death, it emerged that Hogan had updated his will prior to passing, naming his son Nick as sole heir to an estate valued at approximately $5 million. Brooke was excluded entirely from the will. That decision, whatever the personal reasoning behind it, drew attention in the aftermath of his death. Inheritance arrangements following unexpected deaths are often examined closely, not because they automatically suggest wrongdoing, but because they reveal the emotional and financial landscape of a person's final chapter. For investigators piecing together the full picture of Hulk Hogan's last months, the family dynamics were a relevant piece of context, one thread among many in a complex human story. What the investigation ultimately confirmed was this: Hulk Hogan died of a heart attack, explained in large part by well-documented, pre-existing medical conditions. He was a man whose body had absorbed punishment over a 35-year wrestling career and who had been managing serious illnesses in the final years of his life. The May 2025 spinal surgery, while he appeared to be recovering from it, may have introduced complications that are now being examined through potential legal action. No evidence of foul play has been confirmed. The FBI's involvement reflected the thoroughness appropriate for the death of a global public figure, not the presence of a criminal conspiracy. But the story of Hulk Hogan's death is also, at its core, a deeply human story. It is the story of a man who spent his entire life performing strength for the world while quietly fighting battles that strength alone could not win. Leukemia does not care about championships. Atrial fibrillation does not respect catchphrases. The years of surgeries, the broken marriages, the distance from his daughter, these were the private struggles of a man who was always more complicated than the character he played. His legacy in professional wrestling is unquestioned. He brought the sport to a mainstream television audience, headlined the most important events of wrestling's most important era, and became a cultural reference point far beyond the ring. The famous body slam of Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 remains one of the most watched moments in sports entertainment history. Wrestlers who came after him, including some of the biggest names in entertainment today, acknowledge his role in building the stage they now stand on. In Clearwater, the city where he spent his final years, memorials and tributes to Hogan remain visible on walls and in the hearts of fans who grew up watching him. The investigation into his death continues to be reviewed by authorities who have promised to brief his family fully before making any final public statement. The open nature of that process keeps questions alive, as it should. Thoroughness is not the same as suspicion, and ensuring that a man of Hogan's stature receives a complete and honest accounting of his final days is the least that can be offered. The full story of what brought Hulk Hogan to that morning on July 24th is still being assembled, piece by piece, from medical records, surgical reports, family testimony, and the physical evidence left behind in a mansion that once housed one of the most famous men on the planet. What is already clear is that the ending of Hulkamania was not a simple story, and the man behind it was never as simple as the character he played.